Hi, I'm Nelson DeMille, and you are watching the Crew Reviews.
Gentlemen, let's raise a glass and welcome
Yes.
the great Nelson DeMille to the Crew Reviews.
Holy
Thanks
cow.
for coming on.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're honored to have you. And this is your, I believe, 8th John Corey novel and 23rd overall. If you don't count all the paperback originals, it's even more than that. But the maze is on bookshelves now. Can you give our audience a quick spoiler-free review of what's in store?
Yeah, the maze is the 8th John Corey book. John Corey is NYPD homicide, injured in the line of duty, so he retired, but he's been a contract agent for the federal government during most of these books. And in the maze, we see that he is now NYU, which is New York unemployed, and sitting on the porch of his uncle's house, his rich uncle, overlooking the bay in Matinacock, which is on North Fork of Long Island, trying to figure out what to do with his life. And his old lover from Plum Island, if you read Plum Island, comes up on the porch and she has a proposition for him, but not that kind of proposition
yet.
And what it has to do with is the Gilgo Beach murders, which will, the local Gilgo Beach is part of Fire Island and it's near the Hamptons. It is a local murder, but it's got national attention. There was a TV movie made of it, fictionalized. Also a couple of documentaries and some books about the Gilgo Beach murders. And what they are is there are 10 young ladies who were mostly, in fact, they were probably all sex workers. The ones that were identified as sex workers, as we used to say, prostitutes, but sex workers, I find out, is a new word. And they've all been killed. I don't know how, because the bodies are different stages of decomposing, I guess you'd say. They've been hidden in brambles. But once one is found by accident, and I started looking, and there's 10 of them all together. And they're all wrapped in burlap, and so who killed them? Well, this is the big mystery. It's so close to the Hamptons, close to Fire Island. People are speculating it could be a high-profile person. They would love it to be one of the Hamptons a-holes, as I call them. And or it could be a crazy serial killer, and but it could also be a mafia dumping ground. I mean, there's no bodies are found in the same area. So Corey's on this case, and it's always hard to fictionalize, a real case. You have to pick and choose, and you don't want to get lost in the weeds, and you want to dramatize what could be dramatized and downplay a lot of the grunge work that was done on this case. The local Long Island newspaper, Newsday, just had a headline last year because it was the 10th anniversary, and it said 10 years, 10 bodies, 0 suspects. So the police have been embarrassed by the case, and speculation has run wild. When somebody's a suspect, well, if nobody's a suspect, everybody's a suspect.
Yeah.
Police chief Suffolk County has been kind of implicated, the DA of Suffolk County. So this thing has gotten into this steps John Corey, and we know obviously that John is going to solve the case.
Right.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. I was going to ask what the impetus was for revisiting this crime, but the 10-year anniversary must have been popped up, and
yeah,
that was inspiration.
And I've been reading about it for 10 years, and finally just hit me that I was looking for a Corey story, and this was in North Fork of Long Island, where Plum Island took place, the first John Corey book.
Right.
So I said, let's set another one here, but it was more of a challenge than I realized, because it is a real case, and you want to be respectful for one thing. There's 10 young women murdered. You don't want to piss off Suffolk County Police. I think I did. I'm not. That's the next county from me. I'm in suburban Nassau, which attaches to New York City. That county where the Hamptons are is Suffolk, and somebody said you should stay out of Suffolk County for a while after that.
Well,
He's not going to be happy with it.
I think that's one of the great things about fiction, though, is you know, the world's a shit show, and you can right some wrongs in fiction, and sometimes that involves solving crimes that haven't been solved. It's kind of use fiction as a vehicle for that. So awesome.
Yeah, well, we said shit show, so I can say pissed off, right?
Yeah, you can say. We
Well,
have an adult.
With the Gilgo murders, there's websites dedicated to this. There's all kinds of stories and accounts and theories, and I'm sure you've known about this case forever. But how far further down the rabbit hole did you go in order to try and kind of get the information solidified for this particular storyline?
Yeah, again, as I said earlier, I didn't want to get lost in the weeds, but I do have lots of friends and all the police forces in the area.
Yeah.
People who are active duty didn't really want to talk that much. They were partly embarrassed by the case, partly pissed off about it.
Yeah.
Partly, then they went, I don't want to put their head on the block because it's still, it's an open case. Obviously, it's not a cold case. But some of the retired guys who worked on this were happy to talk about it, and they had their theories, and there were a couple of suspects, and some very weird stuff, like all the burlap that these ladies were wrapped in all came from the same nursery, they found out.
Jeez.
And the nursery owner, who was kind of prominent in other ways in Suffolk County, committed suicide. About, I don't know, maybe 10 years now, he committed suicide. Because he never became a suspect. They just happened to notice this, and they spoke to him once, but apparently this set him off, and he committed suicide. But people said it had to do with other things, but it seems more than coincidence.
Yeah.
Like the man whose burlap was used to wrap 10 dead bodies.
Right.
You would think, wow. That's a very interesting aspect.
And there was a doctor there who was he was using the services of one of the ladies. He was the last one to see her alive. She ran out of his house screaming and called somebody on the phone.
Ooh.
And then disappeared, never to be seen again. And he was kind of a strange. Well, you go to Fire Island, you're going to find some interesting people. There 5,000 people live on Fire Island. You have 5,000 suspects in anything. You name a crime, and not that it's a criminal place. They're very
wow. A little bit of money, a little bit of impetus.
Money, right. Exactly.
Kind of reminds me of a modern version of the Jack the Ripper story, where there's so many damn suspects and everybody's certain that they know who it is. But
Yeah,
it's Long Island. I mean, come on. So Nelson, it's been several years since readers last read a John Corey story. The last being 2015's Radiant Angel. But that doesn't mean you haven't been busy. In 2017, we got to follow Daniel Mac McCormick down to Cuba in the Cuban Affair, which is a great story. And then in 2019, you and your son Alex, you wrote The Deserter, which we talked with Alex here on the Crew Reviews. But what brought you back to John Corey specifically? What made you think he was like the best vehicle to revisit the Gilgo Beach murders, as opposed to someone like a totally different story?
Money. No, I mean, seriously.
Follow the money.
Some people, we all know the writers who use nothing but their main character in the whole series and the whole career. I didn't want to do that, but my agent pointed out to me that every Corey book outsells even the best standalones by 20 to 30%. But also I'd switched publishers, and they wanted to kind of leave Corey behind in my old publisher, and so that they kind of put a damper on it for a while. But then we talked about it. We decided at the end of the day, it's really about money.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see. I wasn't tired of Corey, because you could get tired of him. Your continuing character.
Sure.
But Sherlock Holmes finally, Conan Doyle knocked off Sherlock Holmes. He pushed him off Reichenbach Falls. He got tired of him. It was very easy, and guys like Lee Child was a friend, and you know, and I really respect his writing, but he's used, you know, Reacher how many times, and there were others without even going into it, but they do nothing but the series because they may want to spread out a little bit and try something, but the agents and the publisher are saying, hey, we're paying you these huge advances and these books are earning out. We don't want to take a chance. But I've been fortunate in that I could, you know, all my books before John Corey were all standalones. I didn't do any, I didn't do a series. In fact, Corey wasn't meant to be a series. Plum Island was a standalone.
Oh,
You see that as a standalone. It had nothing to do with introducing a series character. But you know what happened when the thing was published? It was 16 weeks on the New York Times list, and you know, when they saw the royalty statements, they said, you know,
we need two.
You know, all right.
Well, I find it interesting. You just said that your new publisher kind of wanted to leave Corey behind. Did you point out that did your agent go, well, if you look at the 30% more sales of this, you might want to revisit John Corey? Thought,
yeah, and that's going back and forth. You know, in one way, I give them credit. They were looking to be, you know, they wanted me, you know, in their house and to leave the past behind. It's like when you remarry, right? You're not supposed to keep talking about your old girlfriend. And so I give them credit for that. They wanted me to, you know, do good stuff. I had done so many good standalones, and I said, you know, maybe you want to create a new series, but we like your standalones, and you know, hence the Cuban Affair, which did well. They loved it. Alex's book, I should point out, The Deserter, is meant to be a series. The character of Scott Brody and Maggie Taylor,
right?
Yeah, great.
Army Criminal Investigation Division. They're partners in the CID. And those books are going to take these guys all over the world. Wherever there's an Army installation and there's a crime committed, it's going to be Brody and Taylor going there. And the new book is called Bloodlines that Alex and I are writing. Set in Berlin, and it's supposed to do with the murder of a CID agent in Berlin. So, you know, Taylor and Brody go to Berlin to solve the case. So that's kind of, you know, the setup there is they're world travelers, and but with the Corey book, this could very well be the last one. I'm not sure yet. See how it goes.
I hope not.
It's going well. I mean, it's selling well. I mean, I just want to scare my agents.
Berlin and CIA agents? I don't know. Is there any there?
Since we're talking about your career globally, I know Vietnam was a catalyst for your writing career, and that you came home and wanted to document your experiences. And though that first novel did not come to publication fruition, at least until parts ended up in Word of Honor and Upcountry, I believe, you found tremendous success beginning with By the Rivers of Babylon. Can you tell us a little bit about this pivot to the types of stories you ended up writing? Were they reflective of stories you enjoyed as a reader, or something else? And I guess, in other words, what guided the subject matter as you embarked on your early writing career?
Well, that was a good question. You know, I did some paperback originals I don't normally mention in public. But we did on-the-job training. But that's how I got into the field. There were you know, a lot of people wrote paperback originals, and today everybody wants to be a hardcover. The first book out. This is good on-the-job training, but these paperback originals are almost all NYPD. It was Joe Riker, NYPD homicide guy, and because it was the era of, you know, lawlessness in New York City, which I think we're seeing again. It was the 70s, and it was a day of Batman and Robin and Serpico and the Knapp Commission and police corruption and vigilantism when it's big. So, of course, the publisher wanted me to do those, but I had no experience there. But I did have, you know, my uncle was a cop and he was a detective, so got some info from him. But, you know, it got me, you know, to the writing game, so to speak. I did get published. They gave me $1,500 a book, which even in the 70s was not a lot of money. But it was a good on-the-job training. But By the Rivers of Babylon, I came to the attention of Bernie Geis, who became my mentor, and he was a man who published William Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist.
Wow.
Valley of the Dolls, Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls. Also published President Truman's biography. So he was, you know, well-known and well-respected. But he saw something in me, and I was a younger man then. And he said, I want to talk to you about writing a book that he always wanted to see, which turned out to be By the Rivers of Babylon. kind of a siege novel of a Israeli peace mission.
Yeah.
Plane is forced down by the city, or the ancient city of Babylon. I won't give the whole thing. But this is something that interested him, and he said, "Oh, you were a history major. You can do this." So, he said $50,000. $1,500 to $50,000. That was good money in those days. So sure.
Yeah.
That was the advance, and then the book. He decided not to publish it himself. He wanted a co-publisher, so he auctioned it. He went what they call auction. He offered it to 12 publishers. In those days, we had more publishers in New York, 12 but not 5.
Yeah.
But it went to auction, and the auction started on a Monday and ended on a Friday. And I called him from a payphone. This is before cell phone. Called him from a payphone on Friday afternoon. I said, "Bernie, how did we do?" He said, "Oh, we did okay." I said, "Okay, so how did we do?" And I'm sitting on this is summertime, sitting on a hot phone booth in the summer. He said, 415,000.
Holy smokes.
Right. I said, "What?" Say what? Say what? And I was in the car with 3 of my wife and another couple. And I said, "Are you kidding?" He said, "No, I'm not kidding." He said, "Call me when you get back." I was up at the beach. I was out talking about it. So I got back in the car, and everybody said, "Well, what did he say?" What he said? I said, "He doesn't know yet. I'm not gonna put the beards are on me, by the way." It changed my life, and this is like,
yeah.
I'm in, it was, but it's easy for a career to end right there. After the first book there's a second book syndrome, they call it.
Right. Yeah.
Writing is pretentious, and he tries to do something that he forgot how he got to where he was with the first book. The second book was Cathedral, about the Irish Republican Army.
Yeah.
Taking over St. Patrick's Cathedral on St. Patrick's Day. And that turned out to be a good bestseller too.
Wow.
So I put in the second book syndrome.
No.
The third book. The third book.
Nothing.
The third book.
Yeah. 20th book syndrome. We talk, every week we're talking with New York Times bestsellers here in the show, many of them, that and we receive multiple takes on how the characters change over time. And Plum Island came out 25 years ago. And even though in character time, that's not a lot, it seems shorter. As the creator of John Corey, do you concern yourself on how the character has evolved over time, or do you just allow the stories to kind of do that for you organically?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the problem with the series, one of the problems, which, is that the character is getting older. The internal chronology of the Corey series is really only 4 years. From Plum Island to The Maze is actually a 4-year period. If you look at each of the books, I had to go back through the book and find, what the chronology was. So
take payphones out.
Years have gone by. 25 years ago by, Corey would be in the 70s, and he'd be creaking along, and he wouldn't know. He's still a young guy. I mean, you've read the book, he still chases women, and he's got a libido. I mean, I'm 75. I have a huge libido, but I don't think every guy has a. So I wanted to make John Corey to try to keep him, forever young. And when Agatha Christie died, it's like 30 years ago now. The New York Times actually did an obituary on the front page, but it wasn't of her; it was of Poirot, her girl Poirot, her character.
Yeah.
And estimated that Poirot was like 115 years old, which is probably true in the chronology that she created. So, when you got a hot character and you're moving him along, but the world changes too. I mean, some of the stuff in this book, I had an editor, a student editor, who said to me, I won't give no spoilers, there's a drone scene in the book. I said, the drones exist then. This would have been this would have been the year about 2001, 2002. I said, yeah, they did. It was one of the first drones back then. And the cell phone technology and all that. So you want up writing historical, because you're trying to keep this thing in a time period that you created yourself for the internal chronology. And you have to kind of think back, what it was. So, it's one of the reasons you don't want to drag a lot of baggage along with what you do with the series. And yet the fans, the public loves this character. I mean, I get thousands of fan mail saying, when's the next John Corey coming out? And I'm writing for them, and I'm writing for me. So, I'd consider it It also depends a little bit on a TV series. Sony TV owns the character itself, the John Corey character, and we've been working with them for some years now, trying to get a TV series, and we actually got a pilot script, which was it's a nice way of putting it. It sucked. It's awful.
Must have been the one I submitted.
No.
So they're trying to get, because they want to do, they see TV needs product, and they see that this is a character has been read. These books have sold millions and millions of copies, and they want an audience. And so, if we actually get a series going, I probably would continue with the book series.
Yeah, and don't change them, people.
Yeah, I know.
So millions of fans.
So Nelson, beginning with Plum Island in 1997, I've personally loved tagging along with John Corey as he investigated murderers, eliminated terrorists, foreign, domestic, and I've thoroughly enjoyed his wit, his dry, sarcastic sense of humor, and his interactions with other law enforcement, and of course the women that come in and out of his life. I'm often laughing out loud as I read his internal self-narrative. But in 1997 seems like a very long time away, not just the years, but like socially and culturally. And I wonder if you felt that too as you were writing inside John's head.
Yeah, very good question. And what happened? I'm going to put it in the best terms possible. Without saying they try to censor me, but maybe they try to censor me. You might notice this is a Scribner book, and with Simon & Schuster was the last book. It's the same house, but I made a lateral transfer from Simon & Schuster to Scribner. One of the reasons I was having some issues at Simon & Schuster, the issues being there were some junior editors there who were unhappy with the John Corey character. I got a lot of blowback from my editor at that time. She wasn't happy with the character, but I said, I reminded them, I said, this guy, Corey, existed in 7 previous books. This is what you bought. I didn't create some monstrous, trouble that you didn't know about. This is what you bought. Yeah, well, but she said, the world has changed. The world is changing since Me Too and the whole.
Yeah.
I said, well, the world changes, but John Corey doesn't change. Neither do I change, by the way. And they said they want to broaden my fan base. I said, excuse me, these books debut at number 1, 2, or 3, and they sell a lot of. We don't really need to mess with the fan base.
Yeah.
So we really had some issues. We had some serious issues. Then I heard, and it might have been rumor that the book was read by a sensitivity reader. There are sensitivity readers out there. It's hard to believe.
That's a thing. That's a thing.
Right. Yeah, it's a thing. And I don't know if it was meant. Then I got to tell me that a lot of this editorial input came from a sensitivity reader. So we couldn't come to, I don't know, we couldn't agree on things. So I moved laterally to Scribner, and I've been editor now who's a little bit more receptive to this character. But it was chilling to think that this book is not, the editing process is supposed to be, grammar, punctuation, spelling, and you got plot holes here, and we speed this up there. No, this had to do with the character and some of the remarks that he's making, especially in terms of women. But the women love this character. I mean, I've just done 15 book signings, and more than half the people who come to the book signings are female. They love John Corey. But these other people in the publishing houses think they're the arbiters of taste or good taste, and there's another reality out there. But that was another reason I was thinking, do I want to go on with this?
Yeah.
John Corey, politically correct, and I could make him a little bit more sensitive.
I guess you could say the same thing about. You could say the same thing about James Bond in today's environment, right?
Exactly.
But by broadening the fan base, what they really mean is shrinking, because all the people who love John Corey be like, yeah, this isn't the John Corey I know.
So they're picking up a John Corey novel, like they know what they're getting. Like all of a sudden, you open up the book and he's out there painting, or he's like taking sensitivity training or yoga classes. Like they'd be like, no, screw this, and close the book. Like what happened to Nelson DeMille?
Well, and the thing you use the word chilling, and I agree, because it's like, okay, first of all, this is art and entertainment.
Yeah.
And second of all, it's a character. It's not you're not asking them to vote for him for president or for Senate. He's a freaking character. But
Right.
Kudos to you for too many people compromise, and I'm really glad you didn't. It would not be the same.
No, and you know, they also had some problems with even when the bad guys were saying something. This is what makes bad guys. One of the bad guys uses the word chink, which is a derogatory word for a Chinese person. He's talking about the food. He said, "Man, it's talking about chink food," and they had big and bold and red, you know, because they knew I wasn't compromised. But they said, "Nelson, this must go. Must underline must. This is racist. This is." Of course, it's racist.
Yeah, the guy's racist. The character's racist. Yeah.
The character's racist.
I mean, what are they going to say? You know, I mean, they couldn't get their heads around that this is a bad guy and this is how I'm showing that he's, you know. So I did give them that one. You won't find that in the book. I mean, I don't know why I gave it to him.
Yeah, you pick your battles.
Pick and choose your battles. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
When I think about your career, I go back and forth. My father got me hooked on you a long time ago. But I go back and forth over what my favorite novel of yours is. It usually comes down to Plum Island, The Lion's Game, Cathedral, or The Charm School for me personally.
Charm School.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've noticed the latter, the Charm School, has influenced so many other books and films, from Salt to The Americans to even parts of Red Sparrow and others. So a couple questions come to mind. Is imitation the sincerest form of flattery, or does it irritate the hell out of you to be ripped off? And secondly, when you were writing The Charm School, did you have a sense that you were onto something special that would capture readers' imaginations? And
I did have that sense, and
awesome.
And I mean, you know, it is a sincerest form of flattery. I know. I watched The Americans. You know, I think I knew where they got that idea. But, and I read Red Sparrow, by the way, which is actually a brilliant book. And
very good book.
So maybe a little of that. But this guy knew Moscow too. So April 1968, I'm in Vietnam. I'm an infantry officer, and I had to do some administrative things. I went to Weifu Bai Air Base because I had to do some administrative. And there's an officers club there, and it's air conditioning, like air conditioning in Vietnam. But it's told me, so I go in there. And there's all these jet jockeys at the bar, you know, knocking them down like in the World War II movies. They're all, you know, I'm not, and, you know, I'm infantry. I just passing through, but they were fascinated by what I did. They're so like up, you know, they really wanted to get shot at. What's it like out in the field? I'm fascinated by these guys. These guys get shot up by surface air missiles, and they can sloughing that off like it's nothing. So I said, you know, we're talking about the MIA, and this is the beginning of people wondering what was happening to the MIAs, missing in action, men who were shot down, seen bailing out of their planes and landing safely, but never appearing on any POW lists.
Yeah. And
we're talking about that, and they said, "Oh, well, these guys, they're being shipped to Moscow." So what do you mean? So, well, you know, the Russians are giving the North Vietnamese the surface-to-air missiles to shoot down American planes, and what the Russians want in return is the product of these shootings. They want these American pilots to train Soviet jet pilots, fighter pilots, and the American tactics. What do Americans do? How are we trained? And they were convinced of this, and it kind of made sense. And I thought about it, and I just tucked it away somewhere in the back of my mind. And, you know, flash forward like 30 years later or something, well, 1987, so it's about 20 years later, I was looking for a Cold War novel because the Cold War was hot, and I grew up in the Cold War. I think I read every Cold War thriller ever.
Yeah.
I was looking for some unique idea, and this thing popped into my mind, and that was the genesis of the Charm School. And I knew I was onto it right away. And then because I went to Moscow, which was hard to do in '87, you had to go with a group, and it was the same month that Nick Daniloff had been arrested. Newsweek correspondent was in Lefatova prison, and Chernobyl had blown in May. I was there in October, so there wasn't many Americans in town. It was a chilling atmosphere because of the arrest of this American, and another American professor had been arrested. It was not a place you really wanted to be, but you know,
Right.
I didn't think I was going to get picked up off the street, but it was possible because I'd written some anti-Soviet stuff prior to that. So
Oh yeah.
the woman I was with, who later married, she said, if you get arrested, what did she say? She said, I'm not visiting you. The telephone,
Nelson, I'm curious. Was I don't know how old Alex is, but was he already born?
That's a good question. So yes, he was born. He was born in 1980. 1980. Right. He was born in 80. So this was 87. 86, 7 is when I wrote the book. He was 6 years old.
Wow.
And, so I went to Moscow and came back with that incident. But I was just so, just blown away by this place. It's horrible. And I said, this place doesn't have 10 years left in it. And so one of the characters in my book, since 87, says this system doesn't have 10 years left in it because it was dead. It was a dead system. And one of my editors said to me, I never forget, she said, and she had a Russian background, Russian American. She said, she said, nothing, not for anything, but the system's going to be around forever. I said, no, this is dead. It's already dead. It just hasn't been buried yet. And sure enough, 2 years later, the war came down, and I was wrong. I said 10 years. I had 2 years left on it.
Wow.
And I started wondering about the CIA. If they couldn't see what I saw, I'm just a novelist. Why couldn't you figure this out? This place was just corrupt to the core.
Yeah.
Citizens didn't care that everybody wanted to come to America. I mean, this is not a country in those days we used to say it was a third world country with first class nuclear weapons, and that's about what it was. It was
Wow.
So anyway, that was so I was so inspired by the book because it was a thing bigger than me, like Vietnam, where the Cold War was hot, and the book did so well. I said, I have a career writing anti-Soviet espionage novels. The Cold War ended, and that was the end of it.
Well, Clancy was doing okay.
And hey, Nelson, I'm curious. So you do that trip to Moscow, considering your military background, and you're a decorated veteran, and you're a novelist writing some. At the time, you've written some anti-Soviet stuff. Did the CIA ever come knocking and try to debrief you, or the FBI ever try to debrief you on your visit over there?
Well, I know, no, not for that particular one. No, I mean, but CIA actually invited me to Langley after a lot of my books have CIA characters, but they're not the heroes. In fact, they're not very sympathetic characters, my CIA characters.
Right.
So when they invited me to Langley, I was sort of thinking, am I ever going to come back from Langley?
More worried about Langley.
Come and visit. Come and visit.
Well, no. The CIA, the FBI has been very good with me. They have a good relationship with them. Locally, there are 26 Federal Plaza in Manhattan, and I have a lot of FBI friends who kind of retired now, and some still active. So I do have some good entree to the FBI. CIA remains kind of impermeable to me. It's hard to get through to them.
Well, speaking of your military, career, folks, don't forget that Nelson was a decorated officer in the first cab of Vietnam. So he might poo-poo it, but the man's a legit hero in that era. And we regularly talk to a lot of other best-selling war veterans, Jack Carr and Brad Taylor and all these guys. And they talk about how their time in service and their particular, bandwidth of action, and how that has shaped them as an author, because they did that before they started writing. So I'm curious how you think maybe your experiences in Vietnam and that particular war, how that might have shaped you as a writer, or did it provide the emotional grit to some of the characters and some of the storylines? How do you think that might have influenced you?
Well, that's a good word, emotional grit. Had I not gone into the Army for 3 years and 1 year in Vietnam, would I be a writer? I guess that's the question. The answer is probably no. It was Vietnam that compelled me to sit down. I wanted to be Norman Mailer and James Jones. And I grew up in a generation of all these World War II, these great World War II writers. were doing well financially, and they deserved it. They were all combat veterans, and that's what I grew up on. And my father was World War II, American Navy. I say Americans, he was a Canadian, but he joined the American Navy. So, that was my generation. And I said, I want to be James Jones. I want to be Norman Mailer. I actually really want to be James Bond, but that's another whole thing.
Yeah, sure.
We all do.
Who doesn't?
That was my generation. We all wanted. Every kid in college I knew wanted to be James Bond. If not, he wanted to be some World War II commando or. So that kind of got me started. But when I started writing, I think I just felt confident. I felt I've been through such crap that you can't complain about having to sit in a room by yourself and tell yourself stories all day if you've done other things.
Nobody's trying to kill you out there.
Yeah, somebody's trying to kill you every day. Getting old. Getting shot gets old real fast. So it's easier to write about it than actually have people shoot at you. Yeah. And I don't think I would have been a writer if I had not gone to Vietnam or not at least joined the army.
Now, I wonder what Nelson DeMille is if he doesn't get drafted. You weren't drafted though, right? You went and enlisted, right?
No, he was in college, I believe.
I was 3 years in college, and I said, I'm bored. I want to do something exciting.
Vietnam sounds very exciting. Right. Oh my gosh!
What was I thinking?
Well, you probably weren't.
I questioned that decision many times in the swamp of Southeast Asia.
Oh.
God. But you got some air conditioning for a little bit, so that's not too bad.
Yeah.
That's all.
Those college hours came in handy.
Okay, all right. So Hollywood came calling several times, including 1999's The General's Daughter, starring John Travolta.
Right.
You had 2003's Word of Honor with Don Johnson. 2005's Mayday, starring Aidan Quinn. But Hollywood it's a weird beast where projects get picked up, scripts get written, and production crews get hired, but in the 11th hour, for whatever reason, the rug gets pulled out from underneath. I know there's been a ton of interest, and you even talked about it with John Corey television series with Sony, and a couple of times it looked like the deal was done and everything was going to get, if the script wasn't so bad, but it never got made. And so I'm curious, do you still care what happens in Hollywood?
To be honest, no. I even in the beginning, I had an agent was now deceased, so I could talk about the dead. He was obsessed with Hollywood, and I was not. But I'm not stupid. When General's Daughter was made, I sold 1 million paperbacks.
God, I love that movie.
It was Travolta's face on the cover. Before that, with my face on the back, we didn't sell 1 million, but feature films, made a big difference. And I thought, these people must be somewhat rational, but dealing with them. My agent and I used to go out to LA usually twice a year. But every time we got on the plane coming home, we would say we needed a bath. It's so vile, but it's so vile. But we were fortunate that we were dealing at the top. We were dealing with studios, and Sherry Lansing, who ran Paramount at the time, was actually a friend of mine from New York. And she green-lighted General's Daughter. I said, those things are going to be made in 6 months. Well, bad screenplay after bad. Normally this thing would have been dropped, but Sherry was and she was head of studio. But if you don't know the head of the studio and you get bad screenplays and the project's not going to get made. You wonder how anything gets made. All the junk gets made. But I was fortunate there, and then William Goldman came in at the end and saved a bad screenplay. Gold Coast, that's maybe my more literary book, really got great reviews compared to The Great Gatsby, and I was compared to Edith Wharton as a writer. This is like every writer's dream come true to be, one review actually said in many ways better than The Great Gatsby. So this was picked up right away by Columbia Motion Pictures. Frank Gil Barnes was the producer. He had been one of the producers on The Godfather. It was studio driven. It was Columbia money. There was no problem with money. And they hired Joan Didion and John Gregory Dunn, two extremely man and wife, well-known writers, and we expected like the best screenplay since William Shakespeare. And I hate to say it, this is like one of the worst screenplays.
Wow.
And I remember sitting at my desk, this is again before cell phones, and Frank LeBron's called and he said, "Have you read the screenplay?" I said, "Yes, I have." He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'm supposed to say it's great. It's John Gregory Dunn and John Ridley and it needs some work." I said, "But Frank, this is unsalvageable. It's this piece of junk."
Wow.
He said, where are you now? I said, "I'm sitting in my office." He says, "Yo," he said, "Where's the screenplay?" I said, "It's on my desk, actually." He says, "Pick it up and put it in the garbage."
Oh, no
wow,
kidding.
dude, really?
Wow.
He knew, and I, like, where did this come from? Like, there was so ego involved that they would change the entire book. They changed my dialogue, they changed characters. They were very, I mean, they're great writers, John Gregory Dunn, John Didion, but their egos were, bigger than mine, I guess.
Yeah.
So that project, died because they just picked the wrong screenwriters. But every project I had, even the studio-driven ones, when money was no object to these people, every one of them died because of the screenplay, bad screenplays. It wasn't anything to do with financing or money or not finding the right actor.
Trying to do it in their own image instead of yours. I don't get that.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to adapt.
True.
A book that takes 16 hours to read into a 90-minute screenplay. I get it. But if you signed on for it, then do it. And if you can't do it, get somebody else who can do it.
Right.
Do you ever think about? I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
No, Nelson. Do you ever think about putting yourself in the writers' room and writing the screenplay for some of your product?
Well, that's what he said. No, I tried it a few times, and I'm not being demeaning to screenwriters who only have to write 90 triple space pages, or I got 100. But it's a different different ball game. But my son, Alex, who, as you know, was a screenwriter, and he was a screenwriter, talent. But even because I asked him, I didn't ask him. I said, one of my books, Spencerville, had not been turned into a screenplay. And I said, "Why don't we turn it into a screenplay, and we'll see if we can market it through my, agents that way." And he found it a challenge. He said, "I'm used to writing original screenplays where I have my 90 pages or 100 pages. Now I've got your 500 pages." It's really difficult to do. When it's done right, like with The Godfather, it can be brilliant. But The Godfather, Mario Puzo was the novelist and then the screenwriter.
Right.
Crichton was the novelist. William Goldman, Marathon Man and Princess Bride. It seems like the best screenplays, okay, here's my pitch. The best screenplays have been written by novelists, not
Go
by...
figure.
So,
Yes, sir.
I think he's onto something.
But it's like you said, it's a completely different medium. I went the other way. I wrote screenplays for a while and just finished my first novel like this year, and I think that's a much easier transition because you're dealing with a bigger canvas. And to take a great novel and distill it down. That's why we talk about this a lot on the show. That's why the move to the limited series that's happening is really good for novelists, because Bosch is a very successful adaptation because it's a broader canvas. 2-hour movie, it's not going to be the same success rate in my opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I want to riff off Chris's question a little bit, but I want to dig down a little bit deeper since we're dealing with Corey. He's a different character than your standalones. Well, we've had both Michael Connelly and Bob Crace on the show, and clearly Connelly found the perfect Bosch, and he's been intimately involved with ensuring the television show does remain faithful to the character in the essential ways. Bob Crace, on the other hand, is not eager or really even willing to let Elvis Cole be adapted because he can't really envision any actor fitting the image that's in his head. And to me, Corey and Cole share some similar traits as far as their irreverence. They're different, but they share some similar traits. And I have trouble casting the right guy in my mind. So my two questions are, do you think that guy is out there for John Corey? And if it was ever adapted, would you be bothered if it was the wrong guy?
Well, I don't think I'd be bothered, but they wouldn't be doing themselves any service. I mean, sometimes they change things so much. When the first Corey came out, Plum Island, 97, a lot of people said this is Bruce Willis. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year after the first book came out, I got a I was in my office, and my secretary said, you have a call from Bruce Willis. I said, no. I said, Diane, somebody's trying to sell us insurance or something.
Just hang up on him.
Yeah, I know. I said, no, it's Bruce Willis. I recognize his voice. She was excited. So I figured, we actually had a mutual friend. So Bruce says to me, he says, I understand that I'm supposed to be Chris Guy John Corey. He never read the book, but he was making his call.
That's funny.
And I said, well, that's what he's telling me too, Bruce. So, so it never came to pass. It was kind of a natural thing, but and we're never talking feature film and not TV series. So only the one Corey had been out. I see Aaron Eckhart sometimes as John Corey. He can be snide a little bit, maybe not as rough as Corey could be. There are a few people, but when I made General's Daughter, when they were going to make it, they announced it was John John Travolta. I already pictured, my character of Paul Brenner as he's South Irish, South Boston Irish, and he's a whole different character. This is not John Travolta. And I said, this is not going to work. This guy he's a good actor, but he did it right. He just did it. He became, my character. And I think if they get any actor who could do, but again, it depends. If it's not on the page, it's not on the stage. If the screenplay sucks, then it doesn't matter who the actor is. And I give Travolta credit because I went on a set and I met him, and he had a paperback copy of General's Daughter, and it was all dog-eared and tabs highlighted, and he's saying, look at this, they took this line out, Nelson, they took this line out, I made him put it back. I was impressed. This guy
cool.
His book into a screenplay. And this is again, and then and also at this point, William Goldman was involved, and Goldman was on board for these changes too. So a lot of these changes were made after the screenplay, but you don't always get that kind of magic where you get a good actor who's got a power, and you get a guy like Goldman who's totally brilliant. The doctor, they call it doctoring on a screenplay. And
see, I picture Tom Hardy. I picture Tom Hardy playing the character.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. That's it's not a tough character. It's not that kind. It's not John Corey's not complex, but
no,
he does represent a kind of guy that you don't see that.
Got to have a little bit of something.
Listen, there's 30,000 well, there used to be, I think, 50,000 NYPD officers. You can pull any one of those guys, and they'll probably do a good John Corey.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned ego earlier, and that's what's fascinating about that is it took a lack of ego on Travolta's part to really commit himself to that, instead of so many actors, I'm going to make it my own and everything, and they all make it their own anyway in some way, but that's really cool that he took that.
Nice.
I actually, before we move on to the next section, I have a quick story you might not be aware of that involves the General's Daughter. My brother Joe and I went to an acting workshop, and James Cromwell, and for our viewers, he played General Campbell in the movie.
Right.
He told this story, and he said that there was a set, and it was a confrontation between Bremer, played by Travolta, and Colonel Moore, played by James Woods. And there was this big showdown scene, and James Woods was there early, and he's getting himself psyched up, and he's completely amped up and on, and you can see that he's going to win an Oscar with this scene. And Travolta walked to the set, saw how amped up James Woods was, realized he wasn't in that same headspace, and said, I don't want to shoot this scene today. We'll do this another day. And because he was a star, they shifted to another thing. And of course, Woods has all this pent up energy that he needs to get used to. Well, later Cromwell said there was a scene, and it was a similar thing. He wasn't ready, and he told the director, he said, I'm not ready. We got to do this another day. And the director goes, hey, James, we can replace you. And he said, that's the difference between being a star and being the character actor. But that was a really cool story he told us about the General's Daughter, which I thought was fascinating. Well, Nelson, we have reached what we call the end of the main portion of the interview. You've survived the main portion of the interview. So we're going to raise a glass to the maze again.
Glass in a book.
Fantastic book. By the way, so glad that Beth Primrose made another appearance. Plum Island, love her, great character.
Yeah, see her in this.
But now this is called the lightning round, and basically the questions can be about anything. They might be dumb, they might be simple.
We'll guarantee that.
As my mom always says, think before you speak. This is that portion of the interview where we encourage you to not think before you speak if you don't choose to.
Yeah.
But I will go first. We're each going to ask you 3 questions. It's called the lightning round, but it's not really rapid fire. So Alex was on our show promoting The Deserter. And I know you had a co-writing experience before that, which didn't go as great. But during the co-writing process with Alex, since he was your son, if there was a dispute, did you ever reflexively try to ground him?
I respected his, his youth, bringing his age matched kind of the character of my, the hero, Scott Brooks. So, and so all right, I thought, maybe he knows. People 45 years old talk, and he was a screenwriter and that type of thing. So, I always gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was, he was more of that generation that I was trying to write about. One of the few times when I kind of, let him take the lead.
Take the car keys from him. No.
So Alex was not grounded. Okay, we've established that. Okay, my second question: if you were a detective and you go back in time and investigate a historical crime with all the tools available to police today, what crime would you investigate?
The obvious answer was the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
There's more to that. We all know that. So, and the forensic tools that are available today are amazing. So, yeah.
Nice.
Okay. And
they still wouldn't say or figure out who killed JFK. There's too much money, too much power involved. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
So my last question is, who was Ted Nash based on, and have you punched that person in the face in real life?
Ted was my CIA character. Gosh, maybe my high school English teacher. Every obnoxious man I've ever met, growing up.
Yeah.
It just made him, made Nash the typical arrogant CIA guy. Everybody learned how to hate Ted Nash.
He's one of those characters that I had a visceral, violent reaction to.
Yeah.
All right, is it me?
Yes, it's you, Michael.
All right. So you played football and ran track in the sports era that is much different than today.
Yeah.
So who were your sports heroes as a young man?
Oh, well, Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah, who didn't?
I actually dated a cousin of mine once back in the 40s, and come to the house, not my house, but my aunt's house, and have spaghetti in the off season, that kind of thing. A very nice man. I barely remember him. I was 4, 5, 6 years old in those days. He was a hero. But my father was a kind of a track star in Hamilton, Canada, where he's from. And his hero was always Jesse Owens. Was a sprinter, so Jesse Owens was a hero, and again, he was an amazing athlete.
Right.
And again, going back to baseball, that's all I really knew that I didn't even know what football was. I played football later, but Babe Ruth. We had a lot of heroes actually, and not to get into the whole sociological thing, but the athletes who are our heroes mostly love baseball. I don't really exist anymore. I don't think any of my, any of my children, and I have a 16-year-old, by the way. He doesn't consider these guys his heroes. He watched the game, but there's no heroes there for him.
I never thought about that. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah,
like my heroes growing up are sports, like baseball players.
Yeah.
Do you think that's still true? I don't know.
I don't think no. Doesn't seem like it.
No,
you're right.
Although I will say I have my son who's going to be 13 next month. his heroes are basketball players. He loves basketball. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it comes back around.
My son, who plays college football, has some football like players he emulates and loves, but I wouldn't say that they're his heroes. So,
not like we did back when we were kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Social media, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram have ruined it.
We know too much about our heroes.
Yeah.
For them to be heroes, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. Then let me ask you this: if you could go back in time and replay one game as a young man, what sport is it, and why would you want to replay that game?
Well, I mean, it would be me personally. It would be football, obviously, and it would be the last game of my season, my senior year. We beat a team called West Hempstead 7-6, and I scored the winning touchdown.
Oh, nice!
Yeah,
what a winner!
We had a 0-7 season up to the point of the stand.
0-7.
Yeah, I mean, Yelmont wasn't the best team, but we had some good seasons. But this was a bad season. My senior year was like the worst season ever. But at the end, at the very last game, playing a team called West Hempstead, I scored the winning touchdown. It was 6-6, and then we got the extra point, and we won the game.
That sounds like a TV show, right? Like,
That's awesome.
Yeah. DeMille saves the season. Okay, this is not so goofy, whatever. Is there an author who you think is phenomenal with the craft, but doesn't or hasn't received the credit or the exposure that you think their skill deserves?
That's a good question. I'm sure there's some. I used to know some that impressed me, but I just can't think of their names right now.
Alex DeMille.
Alex DeMille.
Alex DeMille.
I think he's doing good.
This guy.
All right.
So, Nelson, here's your last 3 questions from me. So, readers may remember John Corey has a fear of bears, but how much would he have to be, or you, offer to enter a cage and wrestle and pin an unmuzzled and front declawed black bear? How much would you have to be offered to do that? And I'll tell you why I asked that question after you answer.
I don't think there's any money that would make
for all logical men.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, right. That is a reasonable response. Sean, how much did they offer you to try to do that?
So I had to pay $25 to try it. And
you had to pay.
I was 23. Had I pinned the bear, which I didn't pin the bear, I would have won $25,000. Instead, I was tossed like a rag doll.
And Sean,
3 solid minutes.
Sean, how tall are you, and how much did you like? You're big. You're a big guy.
6'5", and at the time I was 255 pounds and in the best shape of my life because I had just gone to camp with the Indianapolis Colts. And the bear was probably 375 and tossed me around like I was a chew toy.
Yep, there it is. You paid everybody. He paid $25.
Hey,
okay, so
like Vegas.
All right. So here's question number 2. John Corey grew up in New York City during a turbulent time, or he was a character. He grew up during turbulent time, the 70s. Street crime, drugs were rampant, organized crime was thriving, NYPD was demoralized, race relations were tense. Do you see similarities to what New York City looks like today to the 70s?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. And everybody here does. 8 million New Yorkers see it. And it's in the 70s, we saw it as, kind of a deconstruction of society because things, were getting worse from a place that was never that good to begin. I mean, New York City has always had its problems, but crime was not one of them. But let me just focus it. When it's like everything else, when things get better and then they go back to worse, it's people are angry. They weren't angry in the 70s. They were concerned. They were frightened. There were a lot of things, and we didn't know. Demoralized. We didn't know if it was ever going to get. If it was ever going to be solved.
Yeah.
But after having reached, nirvana, which New York City really did. I mean, it was like it's the playground. It was like the best place in the world to live.
Yeah.
You walk down any street, bars, restaurants.
Yeah.
It was it was a wonderful place. And for young people, even for older people, it was it was a fun place to be. And then it goes down like that, and I think people are angry, especially those who bought $3 million condos. That's the other thing. When people have money invested in the 70s, they did not have a lot of money invested in the 70s.
Yeah.
They were mostly renters, and releases expired, you're out of there. But people, put fortunes into their lives and their real estate, and we thought everything was going to get better and better and better, and not worse. So there's a lot of anger, but I don't know how it's going to be expressed. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea what's going to happen. But we'll see. We have a new mayor.
I find it interesting because I was born in the 70s, and so when it says a young kid in the 80s, I grew up right out in the suburbs, right outside. We called it the sixth borough of New York. So I grew up in Bergen County, right outside New York City in New Jersey. And my parents and family, we would never, even though they were from like Brooklyn and New York, they would never go to New York City because it just had that reputation of being crime ridden. Yeah. And then I ended up living in New York City, and it was like the greatest experience of my life. Right. And to see like on the news and just people talking about it, it makes me a little angry, because that's where I started my family and everything. Like, I had a really good experience there, and it's just sad to see it happen.
No, it didn't have to happen. Didn't have to happen. It was bad policy, bad decisions, and bad government.
Right.
Hopefully we'll see a change. Okay, so Nelson, here's your last question. We know you write stories longhand. I was surprised to hear that you often hit 5,000, or at times have hit 5,000 words a day longhand. Yeah. But did you ever, at any point, attempt to write a story using the keyboard?
No. I mean, I can't type, and my generation grew up. You found a girl who's going to do this for you, right? And even in high school and college, you found some girl's going to do it for you. Why would you do it? But I learned how to print and do script, and you give it to somebody, and that's what I still do. And there's nothing between me and the thought. Whereas with the keyboard, you're doing this, but when I'm writing with one hand, it's a one-handed occupation. The other hand is either got a cigarette going
or drink.
No, I would have a drink while I'm writing, but 6 o'clock comes, yes.
My hand cramped up just hearing you wrote 5,000.
Oh, amazing stuff.
I broke my right hand once, and I couldn't do it if I had to, unless I wrote left-handed. But
amazing stuff.
But I think Colin Coben. Friend, I think he does some of his manuscript longhand. I know a lot of executives write the first draft of a letter, an important letter, longhand, because
Mark Cameron does.
Mark Cameron, who writes the Tom Clancy novels now, he writes longhand. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's not a bad. I mean, they say that Mark Twain, was one of the first people to use a typewriter to turn his manuscript into his publisher typewritten. But they said that his stuff pre-typewriter that he put longhand was his best stuff, and that when he switched to typewriter, the writing got worse.
Wow!
All of us say,
maybe I'm gonna have to try start writing.
Yeah, maybe it slowed down his thought process. That's what it did.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, it's worked for 23 novels.
Don't change it.
And even though I understand where you are on saying it might be the last one, we really dearly hope it's not. John Corey is one of my favorite and most fun characters. I do hope somebody adapts it and you sell another 1 million paperbacks of all the John Corey books. Whatever keeps you going, because we love the stories, and we were honored to speak with you.
Thank you. You guys have been great. Thanks so much.
Cheers, sir.
Cheers. Take care.
Cheers.
Boys, another hellacious hour with another tremendous author.
Yep.
Every week's an honor. This one maybe more so than usual, just because I've been reading this guy for decades.
Yes.
He's a true writing hero of mine. John Corey is a fantastic character, never changed, no matter what people tell you.
That's right.
Laugh out loud, funny, terrific
Yes.
plotting. Everything about this book I love. But I really love this hour speaking with Mr. DeMille. And
Me too.
I love every hour with you guys. So I'm
Oh.
gonna raise a glass to Mr. DeMille and to my co-host.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Even you, Chris.
I love you, Sean.
I'm gonna have to refill it because of you, Chris.
The windup and the pitch. And here we are. And Nelson DeMille and The Maze, a John Corey novel. And it's Sean, and that beard is telling some tales that he's got some stories to tell from way back in the day. In 3, 2, and meow.
This book is great.
Do we have a new guest?
Never changed, John. Oh, God damn you.
What? We did. Where'd he go? Get him back. Son of a bitches.
We told him not to leave until after the show.
It's been so long.
That ruined it, man. That ruined my night.
I had no idea what you said.
I had the need to go out and
I had a
walk.
great thing going until you.
No, you didn't. You
I
had
did.
nothing great going.
Well, you got to
Awesome.
be wheezing while you're talking if that's happening there. Take 2 on The Maze and meow.
Great conversation. Chris, seriously.
What?
Mike's got to go. And I can't.
Where's he
do it.
going?
I can't.
I
do it
haven't
with-
done anything.
You keep showing that damn face. I can't do it.
Right.
Huge fan.
Yes. Agree.
What were you
I
flashing?
agree.
What were you flashing? What was
Just
it?
showing the cover.
I was showing the cover of the book.
John Corey Neville, The Maze, Nelson DeMille, and this is Sean Cameron. Take 29 and